Hello, eighth grade, and welcome to what is lesson 20, chapter 20 of Farewell to Manzanar by Jean Wakasuki Houston and James D. Houston. I did decide to set a timer on this lesson because I want to keep it at 20 minutes. Although the chapter is pretty short, there's a good chance there's a lot of discussion that we will have in this chapter. I want to make sure that we understand the questions because some of these are pretty in-depth and challenging. So let's take a look right at those questions right now. And here they are. So we see chapter 20. Question 1, Jean tells us that you cannot deport 110,000 people unless you have stopped seeing individuals. What does she mean by this? And I'm going to stop to talk about this one right now because it's easier to kind of explain it, and then you'll just kind of get it a little bit more as we begin to read that part of the book. So it would be hard to move people when you care about them. You know, if you stop seeing them as individuals, you look at them as a group, and it's easier to do something that's difficult. Whereas if you look at each person individually, you think about their home life and everything that they've had, it would be a whole lot harder to just pick up people and move them and not care about the lives that they had. So a comparison that we could make to that, although it's very different, is that, you know, when you don't know people and you think of a group, it's easy to make judgments and be able to not care about how certain things affect those people. Something that I have in mind right now is that we have two different groups in our country as far as those who want to open our country back up and those who wish to stay kind of closed and be able to protect themselves. And both sides, there's a value to that, but it's easier when you sit on the other side of the fence to be able to start judging and not understanding where that other side is coming from and to be able to make angry accusations. So it's kind of the same sort of thing here, whereas within our country, we were on the defense against Japan and we wanted to protect ourselves, and the easiest thing to do is not to look at each person individually and think, well, they've been loyal citizens or they've been living in our country for 50 years, and to be able to easily just scoop them up and move them. So when you look at them as a group and not as individual people, it makes it something easier to do. I'm not sure if I helped clarify that at all. Hopefully it makes a little more sense as we read over that, and you'll be able to put it into complete thought with your sentences. All right, let's take a look at question 2. So notice that there's a lot here. The question is pretty long. I expect your answer to also be a good paragraph. The author says that there were certain areas where she was allowed to excel, yet other areas where she was blocked from participation. So in what areas was she allowed to shine? And we're going to pinpoint those as we read. What are the things that it was okay for her as an Asian girl to be able to do when she moved? We're going to be reading in her high school at the time after leaving Manzanar. What areas were closed to her? So there are things that are blocked from her because she is of Asian descent. And then the second part, you have to do some thinking here. Have you ever felt that some school or social groups were closed to you? Do these unwritten social rules still exist in schools today? And explain your thoughts. And I usually do get two types of answers here, especially in the community that we live in. Sometimes we look at them, many of us are very similar, that there aren't, no, we don't really see that. But if you look, there might be other people who are feeling the complete opposite, that yeah, certain things are blocked from me because of such and such in my background. Or sometimes we might even be looking at social status or that kind of a thing. You answer it how you see fit and as honestly as you see fit. So we also have 4 more questions along the other side. Question 3 right here. How did Jean respond to the prejudice she faced? So when she's blocked from these different groups or when certain people point out a prejudice against her, how does she react? We'll see that quite clearly, and I'll make sure to point that out. As an adult looking back, at that time? Is Jean proud of her response? So there's going to be a response and she'll realize whether that was good or not. And we'll talk about that as well. Number 4, while performing as a baton twirler for the Boy Scout band, Jean realizes that she does have some power in her new environment. What is that power? How is this also ironically a way to make someone invisible or powerless? Once again, when we get to this part in the book, I will make a point to stop and try to explain that. I know the questions on irony are the ones that really truly give us some difficulty, especially in this book, they're a little more challenging. So if you're thinking, I'm gonna not be able to find that one on my own, please watch the video and follow along with me because I'll stop and point that out. Number 5, what happened to Papa once Woody returned from Japan? And 6, why does Papa's dignified bow at the PTA awards dinner humiliate Jean? So those are the questions that we have for chapter 20. And if you would please get your book out and follow along with me. Chapter 20 starts on page 157. It is called A Double Impulse. When the 6th grade teacher ushered me in, the other kids inspected me. But not unlike I myself would study a new arrival. She was a warm, benevolent woman who tried to make this first day as easy as possible. She gave me the morning to get the feel of the room. That afternoon, during a reading lesson, she finally asked me if I'd care to try a page out loud. I had not yet opened my mouth except to smile. When I stood up, everyone turned to watch. Any kid entering a new class wants, first of all, to be liked. This was uppermost in my mind. I smiled wider, then began to read. I made no mistakes. When I finished, a pretty blonde girl in front of me said quite innocently, "Gee, I didn't know you could speak English." She was genuinely amazed. I was stunned. How could this have even been in doubt? It is difficult now to explain her reaction, but at age 11, I couldn't believe anyone could think such a thing, say such a thing about me, or regard me in that way. I smiled and sat down, suddenly aware of what being of Japanese ancestry was going to be like. I wouldn't be faced with physical attack or with overt shows of hatred. Rather, I would be seen as someone foreign, or as someone other than American, or perhaps not seen at all. During the years in camp, I had never really understood why we were there, nor had I questioned it much. I knew no one in my family had committed a crime. If I needed explanations at all, I conjured up vague notions about a war between America and Japan. But now I'd reached an age where certain childhood mysteries begin to make sense. This girl's guileless remark came as an illumination, an instant knowledge that brought with it the first buds of true shame. From that day on, part of me yearned to be invisible. In a way, nothing would have been nicer than for no one to see me. Although I couldn't have defined it at the time, I felt that if attention were drawn to me, people would see what this girl had first responded to. They wouldn't see me. They would see the slant-eyed face, the Oriental. This is what accounts in part for the entire evacuation. You cannot deport 110,000 people unless you have stopped seeing individuals. Of course, for such a thing to happen, there has to be a kind of acquiescence on the part of the victims, meaning that they're just giving in. Some submerged belief that this treatment is deserved, or at least allowable. It's an attitude easy for non-whites to acquire in America. I had inherited it. Manzanar had confirmed it. And my feeling at 11 went something like this: you are going to be invisible anyway, so why not completely disappear? But another part of me did not want to disappear. With the same sort of reaction that sent Woody into the army, I instinctively decided I would have to prove that I wasn't different, that should not be odd, that it should not be odd to hear me speaking English. From that day forward, I lived with this double impulse. She has the impulse to remain invisible and not be seen, but she also has the impulse to prove herself. The urge to disappear and the desperate desire to be accepted. I soon learned there were certain areas I was automatically allowed to perform in. So right here, page 159, this is where we start to get to the answer to that question too. What are the areas that she's allowed to excel and shine? Here they are: scholarship, athletics, and school time activities like the yearbook, the newspaper, and student government. I tried all of these and made good grades, became news editor, held an office in the girls' athletic league. I also learned that outside school, another set of rules prevailed. Choosing friends, for instance, often depended upon whether or not I could be invited to their homes, whether their parents would allow this. And what is so infuriating looking back is how I accepted the situation. If refused by someone's parents, I would never say, go to hell, or I'll try other friends, or who wants to come to your house anyway? I would see it as my fault, the result of my failings. I was imposing a burden on them, which I hope you realize obviously is not true. She can't control that she's Japanese, and that she can't even control the fact that she lives in the United States. Her parents brought her here. I would absorb such rejections and keep on looking, because for some reason, the Scholarship Society and the Athletic League and the yearbook staff didn't satisfy me, were never quite enough. They were too limited, or too easy, or too obvious. I wanted to declare myself in some different way, and old enough to be marked by the internment, but still too young for the full impact of it to cow me. I wanted in. At one point, I thought I would like to join the Girl Scouts. A friend of mine belonged, that blonde girl who had commented on my reading. Her name was Radine. Her folks had come west from Amarillo, Texas, and had made a little money in the aircraft plants, but not enough yet to get out of Cabrillo homes. We found ourselves walking partway home together every day. Her fascination with my ability to speak English had led to many other topics, but she had never mentioned the Girl Scouts to me. One day, I did. Can I belong? I asked, then adding as an afterthought, as if it would to ease what I knew her answer would have to be, you know, I'm Japanese. Gee, she said, her friendly face suddenly a mask. I don't know, but we can sure find out. Mama's the assistant troop leader. And then the next day, gee, Jeannie, no, I'm really sorry. Rage may have been simmering deep within me, but my conscious reaction was, oh, well, that's okay, Radine. I understand. I guess I'll see you tomorrow. Sure, I'll meet you at the stoplight. I didn't hold this against her any more than I associated her personality with the first remark she made. It was her mother who had drawn the line, and I was used to that. If anything, Radine and I were closer now. She felt obliged to protect me. She would catch someone staring at me as we walked home from school, and she would growl. What are you looking at? She's an American citizen. She's got as much right as anybody to walk around on the street. Her outbursts always amazed me. I would much rather have ignored those looks than challenged them. At the same time, I wondered why my citizenship had to be so loudly affirmed, proven. And I couldn't imagine why affirming it would really make any difference. If so, why hadn't it kept me out of Manzanar? But I was grateful when Radine stuck up for me. Soon we were together all the time. I was teaching her how to twirl baton, and this started a partnership that lasted for the next 3 years. I hadn't forgotten what I'd learned in camp. My chubby teacher had taught me well. Radine and I would practice in the grassy plots between the buildings, much as I used to in the fire breaks near Block 28, behind the back, between the legs, over the shoulder, high in the air, above the 2-story rooftops, watching it, timing its fall for the sudden catch. We practiced the splits and bending backward and the high stepping strut, and I saw myself a sequined princess leading orchestras across a football field, the idol of cheering fans. There happened to be a Boy Scout drum and bugle corps located in the housing projects next to ours. They performed in local parades, and they were looking for some baton twirlers to march in front of the band. That fall, Radine and I tried out, and that we suited them just fine. They made me the lead majorette in the center between Radine and Gloria, another girl from the 7th grade. Those two wore blue satin outfits to accent their bright blonde hair. My outfit was white with gold braids across the chest. We all wore white calf-high boots and boat-shaped hats. We worked out trio routines and practiced every weekend with the boys, marching up and down the streets of the project. We performed with them at our junior high assemblies, as well as in the big band reviews each spring, with our batons glinting out in front of the bass drums and snares and shiny bugles, their banners, merit badges, khaki uniforms, and their squared off military footwork. This was exactly what I wanted. It also gave me the first sure sign of how certain intangible barriers might be crossed. So she was not allowed to join the Girl Scouts, but she could audition to perform as a baton twirler with the Boy Scouts. So it seemed like intangible is something you can't touch, this barrier, the line that you can't cross, but for some reason it could be crossed here. She's going to start to explain that. The Girl Scouts was much like a sorority, of the kind I would be excluded from in high school and later on in college. And it was run by mothers. The Boy Scouts was like a fraternity and run by fathers. Radine and I were both maturing early. The boys in the band loved having us out there in front of them all the time, bending back and stepping high in our snug satin outfits and short skirts. Their dads, mostly Navy men, loved it too. At that age, I was too young to understand how an Oriental female can fascinate Caucasian men, and of course, far too young to see that even this is usually just another form of invisibility. It simply happened that the attention I first gained as a majorette went hand in hand with a warm reception from the Boy Scouts and their fathers. And from that point on, I knew intuitively that one resource I had to overcome the war-distorted limitations of my race would be my femininity. So we kind of skipped one here. So I'm going to take a minute to show you the questions again. Okay, so question 3, how did she respond to the prejudice? She doesn't respond really at all. She just accepts it. She doesn't yell back at them, unlike Radine, who did yell back. And looking back, she did make a comment. And now I lost that spot as far as where that was because I kept reading right over it. Page 160, she saw it as her fault, so she accepted it. She would absorb those reactions. Sorry about that. Now, if I catch it, I'll pause it and we'll come back and I'll join it together for you. Let's come back to question 4, though. That was the reason over here. And actually, this is where we'll stop our lesson for today, since we hit the 20-minute mark. But what is this power that she has? That power is in her femininity. The fact that she is very pretty looking. She has matured. The boys like to look at her. But what is ironic about this is that this does make her invisible. They do not see her as a person. They don't see her as Jean and think, oh, wow, you're really talented at what you do. It's more or less just looking at her as this oriental pretty girl. The power is in her, the fact that she's feminine, and she can gain power from that because the boys and fathers might like to look at her, but at the same point, she's not gaining the power as Jean. She's gaining a different kind of power. So I hope that made sense. Kind of dancing around it a little bit too, because it's kind of an awkward topic. Hopefully you understood it. If not, reach out, ask a question. I'll try to explain it a little more clearly for you. And like I said, we're going to wrap up there for today. And I'm going to have another lesson where we probably finish chapter 20 and perhaps start chapter 21 in the same day, depending on time. So I'm going to have to stop my share and say goodbye.